Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed to see such sport, and the dish ran away with the spoon. Nonsensical nursery rhymes? Well, now wait a minute. That particular rhyme isn't as nonsensical as you might think. Elizabeth Foster was born in 1665 in England. She didn't dare repeat that verse out loud until she got to this side of the Atlantic. The verse was poking some pretty pointed fun at Queen Elizabeth and her court. In those days, every queen was called a cat, and Queen Elizabeth did play the fiddle. The little dog? Well, that was her lover, the Earl of Leicester. The spoon referred to Lady Catherine Grey, a lady-in-waiting, who tasted every dish before it was served to Her Majesty. The dish? Well, that was the Earl of Hertford, custodian of the Queen's tableware, and it was he who eloped with Lady Catherine. And you thought that this was kid stuff. Elizabeth Foster came to the United States with her little poems. She married a widower in Boston named Isaac Goose, who had 10 children. Miss Foster became Mrs. Goose, thus the name Mother Goose. For the amusement of their children, Mrs. Goose recited other little verses that she had brought from England or written en route to the United States. The one about Mary, Mary, quite contrary? Well, that one referred to Mary, Queen of Scots. King George was Georgie Porgy, who kissed the girls, and they did cry. Edward VI, who seized farms for sheep pastures. Well, that's where Baa Baa Black Sheep came from. Ms. Foster had 6 children of her own that she brought to the marriage. This made 16 children between the 2 of them. Her little verses became necessary bedtime ditties with which to put her enormous brood to sleep. It was about this time that she wrote The Old Woman Who Lived in the Shoe, who had so many children she didn't know what to do. Yet the rhymes which are now so familiar might never have been heard outside their nursery, except on one day while Mrs. Goose was still cooing verses to the most recent offspring. Some of the earlier children were ripening for marriage. There appeared on the scene one Thomas Fleet, from Shropshire, England, who wooed and won the hand of the eldest of their daughters. But he, a staunch Tory, did not like the way Mrs. Goose poked fun at the crown. Eventually his antagonism mounted to a fury, and he sought, in callous ire, to brand her publicly. You see, Fleet was a printer. He copied down the verses and published them in a pamphlet, and distributed them to the neighborhood. Many, like himself, held a firm attachment for England and an utter awe of the crown. So, in 1710, he put together all of the verses which he could find, referred to the author as Old Mother Goose, and sought this way to alienate all the Black Bay from his stepmother-in-law. This, the young Fleet thought for certain, would silence her impertinence permanently. However, to Fleet's dismay, the pamphlet was praised. Everyone wanted a copy. Instead of demanding the author's scalp as he had hoped, they demanded a second printing, and Mother Goose will have an audience as long as there are children. Though it is not for children that she wrote, needles and pins, when a man marries, his troubles begin. That reference was to Henry VIII and his 5th wife, Catherine Howard, who introduced pins from France before she was beheaded by him. Soon, husbands had to provide their wives with special allowances for this luxury. That's when the phrase, pin money, was injected into our language. Yes, those lines, each concealing some sharp barb, these verses, designed to unstuff the pompous politicians and expose the royal scandals, became nursery rhymes. They became nursery rhymes because a printer named Thomas Fleet deliberately tried to discredit his stepmother-in-law, and instead immortalized her. Now who would have thought? I am Chris McCrae. Take care of yourself and the ones you love most.